When we first rented this house in 1975, from here to we have lost order of magnitude 50 feet of top of bluff here, if you will. So the edge of the bluff was 50 feet further out. Then there was a long, gradually sloped, vegetated bank.
And so I know that path really well, and there was no problem running all the way up, whatever it was, a couple of miles to the Sankaty Lighthouse. And then at the Sankaty Lighthouse, there were no fences, there were no nothing. There was a long, wide lawn that stretched out another 50 yards from where the bluff is now. And the lawns of the houses in the 70s would go out another 50, and some would say 100 yards from where they are. That's how much erosion has happened in the last, let's say, 50 years.
As a kid, I remember it took a long time to get to the beach, to walk across those flats, to get the sand flats, to get to the water. And I don't know, 20 years ago, they were gone. And it was, I don't remember there being horrible storms that took it away. It just was a gradual recession of the shoreline.
If you measured it just by where were the top edge of the bluff beginning to be lost, it's moved southward at something like 60 feet a year over time. We started Sconset Beach Preservation Fund in 1993, and yeah, I was the one who sort of pulled a group together to do that, and we've been active ever since. In the earliest years, there's always been some controversy associated with the various initiatives we've taken, but I would say in the earliest years, and the better part of the 90s, all the way through the 90s, it was more cooperative than hostile. We actually got town funding in the first couple of years for a study that we did. We basically were looking for a technology to control the erosion or stop it, and came upon something called beach dewatering, where one takes pipes that puts them underneath the beach face and pumps water out, so basically lowers the water table under the beach face, and that it makes the beach get wider. So we installed 4 different beach dewatering facilities in 1994, I think it was. One was in Codfish Park, one was north of here, one was in front of the lighthouse, etc. And it ended up, long story short, ended up failing. Failed basically because if a big enough storm came in, it would take the beach out over these drainage pipes and essentially sort of halfway ruin the system. So the maintenance bill, if you will, to keep the systems functioning was kind of overwhelming. And besides which, if you didn't repair right away, you could lose beach in between repairs. What we did after determining to move on from beach dewatering is we took a hard look at what is by far and away the most common thing that people do is beach nourishment, whereby one takes a dredge and dredges lots and lots of sand up offshore and builds the beach out by, say, 100 feet or more, and then one does that depending on exactly the wave climate, etc., and particular storm events, maybe on something like a 5 or 6 year cycle. It's expensive, but given the property values at stake, it all kind of makes financial sense. And so we proposed did, hired major engineering firm that's in this business and proposed a beach nourishment project, which which was opposed on the grounds essentially of don't fight Mother Nature. I think there was, and we can circle back to this, I think there was some town gown thing going on that the kind of wealthy people of Baxter Road were muscling the natural beaches to their benefit, and wouldn't the island be better off just letting things go naturally? But in any event, we proposed a beach nourishment project. It was clearly legal under state of Massachusetts regulations and so on, but it was put up for a public referendum and decisively defeated in 2008. We subsequently came upon geotextile tubes, and so which is what we have been doing more recently. So, and this was brought on largely by the fact that erosion continued, and because of a particular storm, or as a result of a particular storm, Baxter Road it was threatened that Baxter Road would be breached. That definitely brought the town in play as a at least potential ally, because the town has an obligation in that situation to find an alternative access to the people who've been cut off. And it was made somewhat more sensitive by the fact that it would cut off access to the lighthouse, which is obviously a kind of major public tourist draw. Primary reason for using geotubes rather than the original proposal was rocks, this kind of a standard rock revetment. The primary reason we moved to geotubes is that it's both a fact and it's logical that if one puts in an installation like that on a convex eroding shoreline, if that's all you do, you're likely to almost guaranteed to exacerbate erosion for your neighbors. And that's because you're not contributing your fair share of sand to the whole erosion process. They're contributing, but you're not. So we have to essentially dump sand into the ocean. What we do is we cover the geotubes with sand. Storms come along, take the sand away. And we know what the long-term rate of loss along the bluff area is of sand loss. It's about 12 cubic yards per frontage foot per year over a 25-year period. So if we supply that amount of sand to the ocean, more some years because of storms, less other years, we are doing fair share contribution and not impacting neighbors harmfully. Absolutely. We have had an ardent, very well organized opposition all along. As I said, there were opponents from day one for the beach dewatering and certainly for beach nourishment. And there is I would say smallish, but nonetheless quite powerful, politically powerful opposition. Well, as I said, we've been here since whatever it is now, 40 plus years. So it's a community, and it's as far as I'm concerned, I love this, the view basically, and it's totally quiet. It's gorgeous. We're close to our neighbors. This house itself was built in 1915, so there's a little bit of history to it. Go down the bluff a little ways, and there's the community of, I guess it must be 7 or 8 or 9, 10 buildings were built in the 1880s, and then 1880s and 90s. So there was I wouldn't say thriving because there wasn't that many, but very attractive and attractively done summer homes that stretch back over a century.
Yeah, we lived on Baxter Road for some time and had spent all those years in my grandparents' house too. And so I have a great deal of sympathy for the people that are potentially losing their houses to erosion, and I understand everything they're trying to do to save those things. They're full of memories, it's history, it's some people's legacy, it's everything. And so anything you can do to save it makes sense to me, and I applaud them for giving it all they can. And I think it's too bad that the controversy over it has become more about not so much the environmental part as people's attitudes about other people, and that's too bad.